Mr. Speaker, with the exception of House Bill number 2963, I move that the House bills listed on page 28 pass third read.
Representative Evans.
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
We're on page number 28, House Bill number 2690. Representative Thielen.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment to offer to House Bill 2690.
Madam Clerk, have copies of the floor amendment being distributed to the members.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Copies of floor amendment number 3 offered by Representative Thielen have been made available to the members.
Representative Thielen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the amendment to House Bill 2690 pass.
Is there a second?
Mr. Speaker, I will
Representative
second,
Maramoto.
I will second the motion.
Representative Thielen, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if members here realize it, but about 1/3 of the members in this body are attorneys. Sometimes attorneys have a different view of life and what bills really make sense. The difficulty, the bill that I am proposing is not the exact language of the Attorney General, but as things move forward, it can be amended on the Senate side to be the exact language if the members feel that it should be. But what this bill says is, we as legislators set policy. And we as legislators have a responsibility to set policy, not the court acting in a legislative capacity instead of a judicial capacity. And up until recently, it has been that we as legislators decide when we, the state, will be allowed to be sued. And we say that within the legislation. If it's not in the legislation, then the state has what's called sovereign immunity. It can't be sued. Well, the Hawaii Supreme Court has expanded a private attorney general a private attorney general doctrine. It popped up in the Superferry case, one of those cases, and the court awarded attorney's fees to the plaintiffs in that case. The law did not provide for the attorney's fees. The law said sovereign immunity, the state is immune from suit. But the Supreme Court, acting in a legislative capacity, decided otherwise. The amendment will keep the authority with the legislature and not in the court. Now, I'll tell you how serious it is. It's become expanded from the Superferry case. In 2003, and a number of us were here
point of order.
in that period of time.
Yes, Representative.
I'm sorry, the speaker is not addressing,
I can't.
she's not
Okay.
addressing you, she's addressing the audience.
Representative Thielen, please look at me since I'm younger than.
Sorry, can you speak up, please?
Could you address the
Sure.
podium, please? Please continue.
I was just doing an eyeball look to see who was here in 2003 and who wasn't, Mr. Speaker.
Please
Some
proceed.
of us
Please
were
continue.
here,
Please
and a lot
continue.
of us, some were not. But in 2003, we passed a really good bill, and it established that all accreted or newly formed land belonged to the state. And this was an effort, Mr. Speaker, to preserve our beaches for the public. Well, Paul Alston had clients that thought differently and said, wait a minute, that's our land, so he went to court on behalf of those clients. The court had a sort of a split decision and said once that bill was passed from 2003 forward, that land belongs to the state, that accreted land. But anything that was in existence prior to 2003, that those plaintiffs could go to court to prove that they had that accreted land and to prove individually that that should be theirs. Paul Alston is suing for attorney's fees under the private attorney general doctrine, $650 an hour. $650 an hour. So without making sure that we ourselves as policymakers will say when we can be sued, the state can be sued, and when it can't, we're opening ourselves to a huge amount of liability. And if the finance chair thinks he has trouble now, take a look at what the future bill would be that we passed just not so long ago, the claims against the state, and take a look at how that bill will escalate. Let me give you an example of just some of the bills before us today where plaintiff attorneys could go in and use this private attorney general doctrine and come back for attorney's fees. The House Bill 2667, which is the super ferry again, super ferry 2. Were that to move ahead, who knows down the road what that would do. We know in one super ferry case, the court already did grant attorney's fees.
Excuse me.
Mr.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So ordered.
House Bill
continue, Representative Thielen.
674. This is about putting some provisos in the OHA budget. We could be subject there. And then here's a biggie. House Bill 2284, which is the fair and reasonable determination on the rents, on the leases. That could set us up for major attorney's fees. And then the one we were just talking about, House Bill 2736, the bill requiring 80% of workers on public work construction projects to be Hawaii residents. All of these could turn around and come back for future legislators to have to look at an oh my gosh bill for claims against the state because we didn't pass an amended bill today making clear that the state cannot be sued unless the policymakers, not the court, but the policymakers say in statute that the state will be open to being sued. Now, I have a feeling that the majority leader is going to pop up and argue ferociously against this, but before he does, or if he does, I would like to ask him to recuse himself. Because while he may not work on those cases, if Paul Alston gets $650 an hour in attorney's fees for our protecting public land, accreted land for the public, then that does accrue to the members of that law firm. Mr. Speaker, whatever, I know that there is a tendency in this heavily Democrat legislature to never accept a Republican's amendment to a
Representative
bill.
Thielen, stick to
But
the
I would
issue on the
like to
floor,
say-
amendment number 3.
Okay, I would like to say in this case, Mr. Speaker, it's the state and the taxpayers' financial liability that is just massive if we don't clarify this law and say to the Supreme Court, you're not the decider. We as policymakers will decide when the state will be open to suit and when we will waive our sovereign immunity. That's what this whole bill is about. And I know that there are some of the senior members in this body that would recognize what liability lies out there unless we enact this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any discussion on floor amendment number 3? Representative Blake Oshiro.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the
Please
amendment.
proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I ask him to recuse himself and refrain from arguing about this. I think there is a
Representative
direct
Thielen, you're out of
conflict,
order.
Mr.
The
Speaker.
Representative Blake Oshiro has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to have him disclose his relationship with the firm that is seeking
Yes.
$650 an hour.
Representative
in
Thielen,
legal
I will-
fees.
Speaker, she is out of order, and can I explain why I don't need to ask
Representative Thielen,
for
could you please sit
recusal?
down? Representative Blake Oshiro, you have the floor. Please
Thank you.
proceed.
First reason I don't have to ask for a potential conflict of interest is because her floor amendment has nothing to do with attorney's fees.